Good afternoon. My name is Todd Benner. I'm the Chief Enterprise Architect at ExxonMobil. I have the privilege of leading the Central Enterprise Architecture Organization. We're a team of enterprise and BDAT architects, and we're responsible for defining the strategic and transformative architectures that drive us towards a more modern and adaptable IT ecosystem, and for establishing the guardrails and principles. And I'm going to be talking about some of those principles that serve to guide and support our architects and our technical professionals. What I'm going to be talking about today relates directly to that mission. I'm going to share with you a few of the stories as to how AWS is supporting us on our journey towards a modern and adaptable IT ecosystem. Joseph?
Thank you, Todd. And I'm Joseph Santamaria. I'm the Director for Worldwide Solution Architecture within the Energy IBU. And the Energy IBU is a group of a few hundred individuals. IBU stands for Industry Business Unit. And we focus on helping energy customers use the cloud to solve their energy and business ambitions. What do solution architects do within AWS? That's something I hear often from our customers. Your solution architects are different than everybody else's. I happen to agree. And it's because of 4 reasons. 1 is they're very technical. They're very deep in technology. They know their staff. 2 is they work backwards from the business problem. We don't work backwards from a sale or an opportunity. We work backwards from understanding what the customer is trying to do and how can we help with our technology get them there. And the 3rd is they are builders. So when you take deep technology expertise and a good understanding of the customer problem, and they get their hands together, they work with the customer side by side, and they build. And they do that always thinking about the long term, okay? Not compromising for a short-term goal or objective on your long-term scalability, your long-term resiliency, your long-term security, and so on and so forth. So really excited to be here talking about this very important topic. And let's get going. Let's start with a little bit of context and background on what's going on in energy. I happen to be a believer, and probably many of you are, that the energy transition and energy security is probably, if not the top 2 issues for the 21st century, certainly 2 of the top 5. And we're seeing leading energy companies really differentiate themselves and transform themselves by starting to bring and develop solutions in the generation, transportation, or consumption of green, renewable electrons and molecules. They are stitching together, they are integrating workflows and workloads to build solutions that will help them manage solar farms, wind farms at scales never done before. And in places never done before either, like deep ocean or deep sea. Beyond that, we're seeing also companies now more and more, especially in the last couple of years, focus on, Exxon is one of them, on low carbon solutions like carbon capture or hydrogen, sustainable fuels. And they're doing that by utilizing technologies like SageMaker, our AI ML service, or IoT, like AWS IoT, or data analytics like S3 or Redshift, digital twins like TwinMaker. Business owners and technology owners in those companies understand that the cloud is the way for them to accelerate their move to the energy transition. Cepsa, for instance, Spanish energy company, reduced their CO2 emissions by 70,000 metric tons, by bringing 150,000 data from 150,000 data sensors into the AWS, putting them in a data lake and optimizing their operations. ExxonMobil, give me an honest thought here, ExxonMobil built with Lambda and DynamoDB and KMS and the API gateway, a number of AWS tools, a platform for their engineers working on large capital projects to be able to collaborate on a real-time basis, to have information, break down data silos. And they're estimating that those engineers are now saving 30,000 hours, again, 30,000 hours of engineering time by working in this platform and with the cloud. That's 30,000 hours more that they can allocate to improve their operations and reduce carbon emissions or move forward in the energy transition. To do this, these companies have to rethink how they operate. They have to rethink their enterprise architecture, their application architecture, and we're really excited to have Todd here today to talk us about how ExxonMobil is doing just that.
Thank you. Okay, so I want to start off with a bit of background. It's a twofold story. I want to share with you how my mental model for cloud, and specifically the benefits of cloud, has evolved over the years. It's a bit of a confessionary tale. And I also want to share with you some background on ExxonMobil's journey to the cloud and tie the two together. The time frame was around 2006. Many of you will remember this. AWS was first to market with a commercial cloud offering, and there was a tremendous amount of buzz about that, what I considered at the time to be a fair amount of hype. 2 years later, Netflix made their big announcement. They were going to cloud. But quite honestly, I was somewhat dismissive of the hype. I was hearing about how transformative this was going to be, how it was going to change IT in the industry as we knew it, but my experiential reference was back to the 90s. A few of you may be old enough to remember that in the 90s we had these large outsourcing companies like EDS and Perot Systems and IBM ISSC. And they offered to come in and run your data center for you, or you could move your systems and applications to their data centers, or they would even come in and take over your IT function and run your IT function for you. The reviews were mixed. Within a few years of outsourcing, there were some that were going through insourcing, and it was a painful and challenging process to reverse course. There were others that claimed that they were saving significant amounts of money, and that the benefits were indeed there. Generally speaking, the benefits were always around scale and focus. Scale, because these had massive buying power. They bought very large amounts of infrastructure and hardware, invested heavily in facilities, and at least in theory, they could pass on the benefits of that buying power and the savings to you, the customer. Focus, because for many of us, I would say most of us probably, running a data center and an IT function is a secondary concern, a very necessary but secondary concern. And so if you could turn that over to someone else, you could focus your resources on your primary business, on your core business. And so I thought about that, and I thought, well, scale and focus, that's tremendous. Being able to save money, that's tremendous. But if we had not made the decision in the 90s to outsource, and in fact, if in my constrained and myopic view of the benefit case, it was a continuation of the same, why would we go to the cloud? And so time went on, and began to see some of the transformative benefits of cloud. Saw them firsthand, certainly heard about them. But I didn't really have clarity as to the real benefits of modernization and cloud until 2018. I was part of a leadership team that was tasked with standing up digital transformation. I'm smiling because I'm looking at a couple of my peers that were part of that. And to be completely honest, we struggled mightily at first. We struggled with our mission, we struggled with our objectives, we struggled with how our teams would work together to bring about this thing that was called digital transformation. We struggled with the very definition of digital transformation. And I remember in some of those early Ask Me Anything sessions and town halls, we would invariably get the question, what is digital transformation? And we had a prepared and scripted response, and we were supposed to talk about digitization and digitalization and digital solutions, and oftentimes that wasn't terribly satisfying for the person that asked the question, nor was it terribly satisfying for us to repeat that story. But I remember in one particular Ask Me Anything session, actually my boss at the time got twisted off and answered the question by saying it's just binary. It's just zeros and ones. Digital transformation is in fact just binary. Now that was particularly problematic because we had just made this big grand announcement that digital transformation was brand new. It was new and exciting. And binary was invented in the late 1600s, formally documented in the early 1700s. So we had a problem. So we all went back and we kind of dug in and we began to research. What is digital transformation and what is the potential? What could we unlock in terms of the value proposition for ExxonMobil? And I came across a book by Thomas Siebel, founder of C3 AI, entitled Digital Transformation. And with that title, you could ask, why didn't you start there? And he took the first few chapters to explain that digital transformation was really business transformation. It needed to begin with a business challenge. That's what opens the door of opportunity. But how you respond to that business challenge is what determines whether or not digital transformation occurs. And it's certainly not technology agnostic. And in fact, he said that your solutions generally occur at the intersection of 4 technology areas. And he went on to list those as including big data, AI and physics-based modeling, industrial IoT, edge, and cloud elastic compute. Why cloud? Well, it ties back to those benefits that you glean through modernization, those benefits of speed and agility, because if you have a business challenge or a business opportunity that opens the door to business transformation, real transformation, you've got to move quickly. You've got to act fast. And if you fail, and oftentimes you will fail fast and be agile, respond to that. And speed and agility are the basis to being able to do that, and modernization in the cloud is what enables that. And so I flipped and I became a modernization bigot, and I decided that if you were not modernizing in the cloud, you were somehow compromising, you were probably failing. Now fast forward a bit, and that did fortunately evolve for me a little bit, really this past year. I came across Gartner's bimodal cloud model. Many of you may be familiar with Gartner's bimodal IT model. It says essentially that you run your IT organization in one of two modes. And really, it's the teams within the organization that all operate in one of two modes. Mode one is about cost and efficiency. So you're looking to minimize the cost. You're looking to drive down costs. You operate in a mode of what we would call flat to down. Mode two is about business transformation. So ideally, you want to locate those teams proximal to the business, as close to the business as possible. Ideally, you want to embed them in the business or ensure that they're business-facing and maintain really strong communication lines. Well, Gartner extended that model and created what they called the bimodal cloud model, and it follows. Mode two is about business transformation. It's about speed and agility. It's about responding to business challenges very quickly. Mode two is actualized through what we call our cloud strategy or our cloud modernization strategy. But there's also a mode one. And mode one is about IT transformation. And when I first came across that, I didn't like it. I want to focus on business challenges. I want to be there for the business. I want to transform the business. But if you think about moving from on-prem data centers where you are tied to elongated capital depreciation cycles that lock you into hardware, and moving to the cloud where you can stand up or stand down resources at will and where you can leverage modern technologies to support your decomposition patterns and practices, that is transformational from an IT perspective. And they called that a cloud adoption program or lift and shift. And so there it was. I was right, late to the party, but I was right about speed and agility being the real benefits of cloud, and that comes from modernization or your cloud strategy. But if you could augment that with a cloud adoption program or a lift and shift program, you're not compromising. You're moving more completely, more holistically, and more quickly to the cloud. So let me tie that in a little bit with the history of cloud at ExxonMobil. We've been at this for a number of years, as have, I'm sure, most of you. But we made our formal declaration in about, it was July, it was summer of 2018. And we did it in the form of 8 enterprise architecture principles and 3 enterprise architecture mandates. And you see those principles, or at least the titles for those principles, on the black tiles on this slide. They're things that I suspect that you use, either they're explicitly stated or they implicitly guide you. They're things like we will deliver modular solutions. We will move on from the archaic, monolithic, n-tier architectures that we've used in the past. We'll lean into the benefits of service-oriented architectures and microservices. We'll glean those benefits, independent deployability and scalability and resiliency and composability and reusability and all those good itties. We will deliver modular solutions. We will handle data as an asset. If you pressed me and said, which one of these 8 is the most important principle, I'm going to point to that one. We will handle data as an asset, and that brings into the mix, data governance and master data management and data quality elements. But it basically is a proclamation that we will be data-centric. We finally get it. We recognize that our data lives forever and applications come and go, and we will operate and protect our data accordingly. We will simplify and automate. All of us have repeatable tasks, sometimes mundane tasks. Where at all possible, we want to eliminate elements of those repeatable processes and tasks. If that's not possible, we want to automate them. We will design for the users. We will lean into the practices and the benefits of user experience and user-centered design to build highly usable solutions, solutions that hopefully delight our users. And then there are a couple of these that I suspect are different from what you might have. Probably the most bespoke is listed here as reuse, rent, buy, and build. And it's basically a stated order of preference in terms of how we go about acquiring or selecting a solution. Our first choice is always to reuse. If we've got some service or application or capability that we can tweak, modify, and deploy, that's our first option, reuse. It's the cheapest option. It's the fastest to market. The second option, if we don't have the option of reuse, is rent, a SaaS solution. Find a SaaS solution that meets our basic requirements. The third option, if we can't find that SaaS solution, is to buy a COTS or a commercial off-the-shelf solution. And the fourth option is build. Now, the irony of the fact that I'm standing in front of you at a builders conference and I'm telling you that build is our last option does not escape me. I will tell you, I am passionate about software development. I cut my teeth on software development. I think we've got some of the greatest software developers in the world. But we recognize that building can be expensive and it can be time consuming. It's expensive to design and architect and develop and build out your development and deployment pipelines and support a solution over its life cycle. Where I've actually been burnt the most is on the time element, where you have an opportunity to deploy something that's differentiating, that gives you significant advantage, and by the time you get there, and we could get into the agile constructs of you've gained some and gleaned some benefits along the way, but by the time you have a mature capability, the commercial market has beaten you, and they're there. And so we began with these ADA principles. We also introduced 3 EA mandates. The question that I always get is, what is the difference between a principle and a mandate? A principle is indeed compulsory. We require that our developers and our architects align with the principles. The difference is with a mandate, if you can't align, we get together, we talk through it, we document an exception to that mandate. We don't do it to be some kind of a police state. We do it so that we can continue to help you and we can bring your solution in line with the requirements of the mandates. The first mandate here, it's what we refer to as our modern security mandate. It's a modern authentication authorization mandate. We will lean into modern authentication and authorization tools, solutions, practices. The second, our API services mandate, patterned very much after the 2002 Bezos mandate, not probably quite as draconian, but essentially that said that you will expose your data and your functionality through service interfaces. We lean into the principle of reusability a little bit more. We focus on reusable APIs and reusable service interfaces. And then the third mandate, and the one that I'm going to talk about, our modern platform mandate. So our modern platform mandate is really our cloud strategy. It really was the basis of our cloud strategy. It said that we will be public cloud first, we will be PaaS first, and if we are to build a new solution or significantly modify an existing solution, then that resulting capability or service or solution needed to be cloud native in terms of its characteristics. We have an internal acronym that really is not comprehensive enough, I think, that we call Cloud AIMS. It stands for Aware, Instrumented, Modular, tying back to the EA principle for modularity, and Secure, tying back to the EA mandate for modern authorization, modern authentication. And so with this in place, we began architecting and deploying modern solutions. Following the principles of data centricity, we built out modern data platforms. That's where we started. That was our initial focus. Built proximal to those and even somewhat on top, abstracted. Modern capabilities in the forms of applications and services. A lot of lightweight, low solutions that we deprecated and modernized and replaced over time, again, following the principles of data centricity. And we even deployed some modern data products and domain services. We also began to very aggressively retire legacy applications in favor of SaaS solutions wherever it made sense, wherever those basic requirements could be met. Again, tying back to that reuse, rent, buy, build. We actually call that R2B2, which helps us remember, obviously a ripoff of R2D2. So we've been at this for 4.5 years. Where are we today? I would love to be able to stand here and tell you that we are completely modernized. We're 100% in the cloud. There are some that would say that I'm ridiculously optimistic in terms of the pace that I think we can go. This proves that I'm overly optimistic because I thought that we would get there very quickly. I don't want to take away from the incredible work that our teams have done. About a third of our applications are in the cloud. But if you press into the composition of those applications, you find that the vast majority of those are SaaS solutions. So we've been very good about aligning to that EA principle and leaning into rent. But that also suggests that we haven't done a lot of modernization. So why is that? What has been slowing us down? Well, it's what I refer to as opportunistic modernization. Recall that I told you that our cloud strategy says if, and only if, building a new application or significantly modifying an existing solution, then the resulting solution needs to be cloud native, needs to be modernized. When you make that kind of a statement, when you position it as such, you essentially are putting an application by application economic hurdle in place. Because we don't get to go out and build applications just because we have a cool idea. We build applications based upon a response to a business opportunity. There's project economics that go into it, and it has to be justified. There are other ways that it can be done. I certainly would understand the argument or the contrarian position that you could just allocate a big bucket of money and you could draw from that and modernize. That is one way to do it, and it makes perfect sense. It doesn't make sense for us. Actually, we got the mandate right. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on this. We're going through a significant business transformation. I would suggest with certainty that in 4 or 5 years, our application portfolio will look very different from how it looks today. We'll probably have fewer than half of the applications that we currently have. And so we want to modernize. We want to take advantage of the benefits of cloud, but we don't want to spend a lot of money modernizing applications that are not going to persist. It doesn't make sense from an economic perspective. So what are we doing? Well, we're persisting our cloud strategy and our modernization efforts, but we're augmenting that or adding to that a cloud adoption component based upon a lift and shift of our existing applications to the cloud. I'll quickly mention it doesn't mean that we'll stop there. We actually believe that we can modernize faster once we're in the cloud, and I'll come back to that point a little later. But we certainly believe that we can glean some of the interim benefits, including higher utilizations and all of the other benefits that go with getting our solutions to the cloud earlier and faster. So the question at this point comes up, you've made the decision to augment your cloud strategy with a cloud adoption program. You've made the decision to go with AWS for this. Why AWS? Why did you choose AWS? I think we could bring up different individuals from ExxonMobil and you might get different answers. I'm going to give you the 3 answers that come to mind for me personally. The first is AWS Nitro. I told you that our data is precious to us. We're going to handle our data as an asset. We want to be able to protect our data. Nitro is certainly the most proven and widely adopted confidential compute solution that's available today. The second reason, and it's based upon personal experience, AWS has been very intentional in taking the time to understand our business challenges and then responding specifically to those challenges, and I'll say more about that. And then the third is our evolving and expanding history of success that we're having with AWS. For me personally, as I think back, probably, I don't know, it goes back maybe 5, 6 years, one of my colleagues was pressing into a challenge. She wanted to accelerate geologic interpretation and modeling workflow. She wanted to abbreviate the time associated with that. She was especially interested in reducing the time associated with locating and collating data. Not so coincidentally, AWS had been collaborating and working with one of our peer oil majors. I think I can say that at Shell. There's a session at 11:45 on Thursday if you want to know more. On something called OSDU, the Open Subsurface Data Universe. Think of it, if you're not familiar with it, as standards and a whole lot more, and you can fill in the whole lot more on Thursday if you go to the session. So we engaged AWS and we shared our business challenge. They took the time to understand that business challenge. They shared a big vision with us. They developed a POC, and then they proved out their technology and capability. And that approach, quite honestly, struck me as novel and unique. It was not what I was used to in terms of a vendor experience. AWS refers to it as starting with the customer and working backwards. I would say, instead of hitting us with some kind of an aggressive, untargeted sell, tell us all the capabilities they have, and if you were at the keynote this morning, you know that list just continues to grow beyond, I would think, the capacity of any one human being to be able to even handle or repeat. But they took the time to understand our specific problem. They shared a big vision with us, and then they proved that they could deliver on that vision. So fast forward. I would categorize the work that we've done with AWS and that we're doing with AWS in two categories. One is lift and shift, and the other is modernization. So I want to quickly kind of tie up the loose ends with lift and shift. We've already really talked about it, and then I'll give you a few quick examples of modernization. In terms of lift and shift, we've made a formal decision, a formal declaration that we will initiate the migration of our applications to AWS, our applications that are on-prem to AWS. This is enabled by AWS Nitro. I've told you data is a key asset for us. It's reflected in our EA principle that says we will handle data as an asset, we will be data-centric, that data will live forever, and we will protect it accordingly. And so we require equal or better protection of the data in the cloud as compared to what we have and have enjoyed on-prem, and Nitro gives us this protection. I assume most of you are familiar with Nitro. It encrypts data at rest, data in transit, and data in use, and we control the keys, and that's very important. It's also by far the most proven and widely adopted confidential compute solution, and it has an outstanding history as far as reliability is concerned. So in terms of examples of modernization, let me very quickly go through three examples. I'm going to start really simple with a SaaS solution, then I'll give you a PaaS solution, and then I'll share the most interesting in my mind, which is kind of a bespoke AWS engineered solution. The first example is our Amazon Connect call center solution. We formally implemented or moved our last call center over in 2019, but the process really began around 2017. At that time, we had an aging hardware-based solution. It was being leveraged for our internal call centers, so think internal ExxonMobil call centers that are supporting ExxonMobil businesses. We were experiencing reliability challenges. It was getting more and more expensive. And so we desired a modern cloud-based omni-channel contact center solution. We did some investigation and we made the decision to go with Amazon Connect. It gave us instant startup. It provides the key features that we were looking for: chat, SMS, voice-to-text transcription, speech analytics, and it delivers a superior customer experience. And it also provided a significant cost benefit, and that was a key part of the decision because we were able to shift from one physical phone line per call center agent to a SaaS pay-as-you-go solution with no fixed equipment or licensing charges. In retrospect, the biggest benefits that it delivered were not anticipated. They were not built into any project proposals or any project economics, because recall that I told you we formally implemented Amazon Connect in 2019. What happened in 2020? Pandemic, yep. The pandemic occurred. I guess it was a rhetorical question, but the pandemic occurred. And Amazon Connect allowed us to maintain those call centers. It allowed hundreds, actually well over 1,000 agents located all over the world to remote connect. And that allowed us and was essential to maintaining a quality customer experience throughout 2020. It also enabled us to scale down and scale down significantly. And it's interesting because when we talk about cloud, we always want to talk about scaling up and scaling out and how cool is all that. But scaling down is a way to glean significant savings. And with the pandemic came a reduction in the demand for these call centers, for several of the call centers. And Amazon Connect enabled us to scale down and pay for only the minutes and the telephony services that we consumed and required. And that was a significant savings over the course of 2020. The second example of modernization, it's a replatforming example. It has to do with our legacy applications that use an Oracle backend or an Oracle database. Now, these applications are essential to existing value streams, critical to existing value streams, but we don't want to rewrite them. We're not ready to rewrite them. And it ties back to that business transformation element that I kind of brushed over, and the fact that some of them may not persist. We want to glean the benefits of cloud as much as possible without touching the code. Now, there are other options, certainly, besides Amazon RDS for Oracle. We could go with a niche cloud provider. The problem with going with a niche cloud provider is you take on the overhead of so doing, and this is only for a few use cases, and so it doesn't make a lot of sense for us. We could go with another hyperscaler, but if you press into those offerings, at least when I've looked at them, they look very IaaS-centric. Amazon RDS for Oracle gives us a PaaS alternative in that they handle the administration tasks like backups and software patching and monitoring, and they also provide us with a highly performant, scalable, and secure solution. We have improved availability since Amazon RDS Multi-AZ gives you synchronous replication across multiple availability zones. It gives you the flexibility and benefits of an OpEx cost model. We have IT staff productivity benefits, and that's derived from less staff time required to deploy and manage and support the database resources, and it lowers our overall costs. To a great degree, that's attributed to the fact that RDS enables encryption at rest, and so we can carry a standard edition license, which is a much less costly license. The third example that I'll share with you, to me the most interesting, internally we refer to it as our unconventionals data harvesting solution. It's a greenfield solution that AWS engineered for us that leverages Amazon Text Track and Amazon Comprehend. As a bit of background, we've leveraged RPA in the past. The solution that I was most closely involved or engaged with was what we call our morning report email solution. In that case, emails are being sent in the morning reports, by internal field supervisors, and that's an important detail because these are ExxonMobil employees. So we can prescribe certain formats and structures. We can even prescribe the email template that they use. And so the level of RPA intelligence that's required is fairly remedial in that case. We scrape the key fields, we format those data objects into a data record, and then we insert that data record into a Wells database, and we've got a Wells application that we can use for analysis and visualization. But the challenge that we had in the unconventional space was nuanced and more complex because, generally speaking, they're provided by third-party service providers and partners. So they're not ExxonMobil employees, and you say, well, you can still prescribe a certain format or structure, and we found that that generally is not the case. They follow their own default formats and structures, or oftentimes it seems to be a lack of structure. Generally speaking, these are PDFs that come in and they're attached to emails. And they don't have consistency in terms of data content or even data quality. What AWS engineered for us is an intelligent document processing capability. It begins by uploading those documents and storing them in an Amazon S3 instance. And then leverages Amazon Text Track to automatically extract words and lines of text and tables. And then Amazon Comprehend uses its NLP capabilities to extract insights from the documents and outputs those discovered insights that we can then in turn leverage to improve our business. I think the thing that's been most surprising for those of us who have been around this is even as compared to the most remedial and simple RPA solutions that we've used historically, this worked just out of the box. It was like day one, and it's been incredibly consistent, and that's Text Track specifically that I'm referring to. So at this point, I'll wrap it up, but I want to wrap it up by answering the obvious question, and that is for us what makes AWS different. And for me, it's about a unique vendor experience. I've told you that AWS begins by seeking to understand our specific business problems, our specific challenges. We like to say that we fall in love with the business problem. What does that really mean? We believe that effective IT organizations are focused on the business challenge, the business problem. And so we say that we fall in love with that business problem. We're focused on it. And AWS seems to share that same value or that same recognition. They don't lead with a big technology sell. They talk about starting with the customer and working backwards. They seek first to understand and then to be understood. I also want to reiterate the fact and emphasize the fact that I don't expect our lift and shift journey to end once we are someday able to, if we're ever able to completely shut down our data centers. Lift and shift, in my mind, is the first step in what I refer to as the maturity continuum for optimization. In the context of lift and shift, optimization generally means utilization, being able to utilize the resources at a higher level to a greater degree. But as you mature and as you shift, you lean more into automation. And certainly the capabilities for automation in the cloud are far greater than those on-prem. The real prize, though, the real sign of maturity is when you get to serverless and scale to zero. Scale to zero, an internal term that we use for never paying for idle time. So lift and shift is certainly not the end of our journey. But rather than viewing lift and shift as a compromise, as I once would, I think we recognize that having our systems and solutions in the cloud better positions us to move quickly and continue our modernization journey with an eye towards that maturity element of serverless and scale to zero. Joseph?
And I particularly like your last slide. It talks about how, I'm going to steal that from you, how you fall in love with the business problems and you work backwards from what you're trying to do as a business. Then you lift and shift, you start getting some scale in the cloud. It's important, you get some operational efficiencies, you start to save money, you start to get more reliability. But the goal is always to get to that agility that cloud native brings, the modernization part. And in the next part of this presentation, we're going to be talking about how do we do that. And I'd like to start with a quote from Andy Jassy back from when he was CEO of AWS. And I like this quote because it kind of encapsulates really the four dimensions and the four components that we've seen in successful transformation. And as you would expect, and we hear over and over and again, they're not technical. We know EC2 works, S3 works, SageMaker works. That's not the problem. The four things that we're seeing consistently across migration journeys and transformation journeys that make the difference between those who succeed and those who don't are one, executive alignment. Right? That goes back to the working backwards. The organization and the executive team needs to be aligned on why is it important for us to move to the cloud? What's the business value that we're going to get by moving to the cloud? And that needs to be understood across the organization. Second, when that's understood, the executive team needs to set up a top-down, ambitious goal that represents and tells the organization the level of commitment, but it also forces the organization to think differently and move at a pace that is faster than it would organically move. And I hear that from customers. Yeah, this seems very obvious, but I hear this from customers many times, and they say, yeah, we're going to do this. I was at an EVC with a large renewable company, talking with their CIO and said, yeah, we're going to do this. But the question is not, you have to do it now. You have to do it up front, because the organization needs to get that message very early on at the beginning of the journey. If you have these two things done, you're in really good shape to start or to get going. The next thing is train your resources and invest in your people. We've seen companies that invest and are very intentional in their training programs, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, move to the cloud, and their cloud adoption is 80% faster than those who don't. And not only that, not only the speed, but the employee engagement is also 30% higher than those that don't. The cloud journey and the transformation that you're going through is a great opportunity to invest in, develop the leaders of your future, and to invest in the talent in your organization. And when you have that, and people know what to do and how to operate and how to build in the cloud, then you need a plan to transition and to build to execute your journey. And we always say that plan, while it's a multi-year plan, it has to be incremental. Just start small, scale fast. The days of, we're going to spend $200 million in a large project, large ERP project, and hopefully at the end we get what we expected after a few years, those days are gone. Why is this important? Well, these projects, think about an organization like ExxonMobil. The complexity, the different dimensions, the scale, makes these transformations and these initiatives complex. One, you have to understand your landscape and your resources pretty well. And while some companies are very good at this, we also see other companies that they just, they build organically and they don't have their arms around their estate. They need to understand the dependencies so that we can move things in groups, in move groups. They need to understand operational processes, right? How do you do change management? How do you operate in the cloud? It's different than what you do on premises. Yes, you can do the same things in the cloud, but you're going to compromise your ability to bring agility and speed by moving to the cloud. Regulatory and security, I was really excited to hear Todd highlight Nitro. Right, there was a meeting with a large transmission owner here in the United States about their cloud journey, and we had the CISO there, and she was quiet for about 90 minutes, that whole meeting, and I thought, well, probably we have a problem. She's concerned with the cloud, and I asked her, is there any concerns or anything, that you want to ask? And she said, me? I'm the one who asked them to come here. This is safer. To me, that was a pivot moment. You're starting to see now the security in the cloud as a differentiator and a reason to move to the cloud, which obviously that wasn't always the case. And now we talk about people and culture issues, right? That's why it's important to have that executive alignment and that executive message and investing in people so they are bought into the transformation with the right training and the right motivations from a business standpoint. And then regulatory. We're a heavily regulated industry. AWS offers over 300 security services like AWS Config, AWS Inspector, Macy, and so on and so forth. And we comply with 98 industry, not all oil and gas or energy, but 98 different certifications and regulatory frameworks, more than any other cloud provider. So how do we do this? We've done hundreds of migrations with customers over time in AWS, and we encapsulated the lessons learned and the best practices in what we call the Migration Acceleration Program. It's a 3-step program that starts with an assess phase. That's a few week phases, through 2 to 4 weeks is what it lasts. And the point here, the goal is to create a case for change. Try to understand what's your inventory, what you're trying to do. Do an initial total cost of ownership, an initial business case, what the savings could look like. We do what we call a migration readiness assessment, which is we bring experts and they sit with you. And we look at 6 pillars. We look at people, governance, your business case, your operations, your security. And typically it's a 4-hour exercise. I've seen some of them last 2-3 days. We have some customers who are really, really engaged. It's like a good cricket match. And they're really, really engaged, and it takes a few days, which is really great. And out of that, we also start to do what we call immersion days, and open briefings and workshops, open office hours, where we start to educate people on what the migration to the cloud, what the journey looks like. Out of these, we were able to, one, create that case for change, as I said, but also to understand what are the accelerators that we need to bring. What are some of the gaps and needs that you're gonna need specifically for your journey? We call those accelerators, and we'll bring that in the next phase, which is the mobilize. We call mobilize phase. In mobilize, what we do is we start to get ready for scaling. Okay, we go much deeper in the assessment. So we'll look at the portfolio of applications you have. We'll do a deep discovery. We'll look at dependencies across those applications. We'll bring a discovery tool. Many customers have already their own discovery tool. If they don't, we bring typically a migration evaluator. It's our own discovery tool. It's an agentless tool that will connect with your hypervisors. We'll look at performance. We will look at network traffic, so on and so forth. And out of that, we will look at those application dependencies, create the move waves. We will also start looking and create a plan according to to those move waves and what makes sense to progressively move your state to the cloud. We'll also invest in people, and we'll do a learning needs assessment, and we will look at your organization, your stakeholders, and we will put together a detailed, personalized, and customized training plan for each of them based on what they know, where they are in their knowledge curve, and based on what their role is. And that's also, as I said earlier, very, very important. And we always tell customers, start investing, start that training journey up front and as early as possible. From a people perspective, we also start looking at organization. We start looking at what's the right organizational model. How does your cloud center of excellence look like? How do we need to change? What are some of the practices we need to do? And then we look into the platform itself. We start to build your landing zone. Okay, you're investing in having a good foundational elements. Start to look at your security. Sometimes you work with your auditors if you're a public company, and we'll do some mock audits to make sure that we're compliant with whatever regulatory frameworks you follow. And we start investing in tooling as well. We start to look at security, how you're going to do observability in the cloud, what are some of your change control processes or change management, how do we need to, in detail, what needs to change. And we start to build that up. And then finally, we scale, right? We launch and we start to the migration and the modernization. And we iterate, as I said earlier, we learn with every iteration, we pick up speed, and we grow faster. One of the questions that we get from customers is usually, what should I do first? Should I lift and shift? Should I migrate first and then modernize? Or should I modernize, and once I have my house in order, should I then move to the cloud? And Todd talked a little bit about that and their experiences at ExxonMobil. Our recommendation is invariably you have to lift and shift first and then modernize. And it sounds a little bit self-serving, right? You're going to say, well, of course you're going to say that because you want to move to the cloud quickly. But that's not really the reason. The reason is because when by migrating and lift and shifting, first you're going to get to value quickly. Live Nation save 18% TCO just by moving to the cloud before they even did any optimization. You're going to start getting some operational benefits of the cloud, some resiliency benefits. When BP moved to the cloud, their SAP environment, they saw right away a 40% increase in performance. And at the same time, the lower cost for their supply chain group. So you're going to start getting scale. You're going to start training your people. You're going to start getting capability. And after a while, you're going to have the confidence and the knowledge and the ability to start modernizing at scale. And it doesn't mean, it's not an either or, and Todd alluded to that. You do a little bit of both. But earlier on, you want to be indexed more on your migration and your lift and shift. And as you get skills and confidence and capabilities and your processes settle in the cloud, so to speak, and you get that agility, then you can start modernizing and getting to the point where you really get that enterprise agility, that continuous reinvention, and that innovation that comes with cloud-native solutions. To do that, we bring a number of solutions. We have some migration tools and transformation tools that we have within AWS, and we also have many from partners, right? And we have them all across the life cycle here for the migration acceleration program. I talked about discovery tools like migration evaluator. We have the application discovery service that will help you with that deep inspection, all the way to system manager in terms of operations that will help you, track your resources in the cloud, your resources on premise, your patching, your operational issues, and we can instrument that end to end with, as I said, our own set of tools, or with AWS partners. Many of you have already tool sets. We have over 100,000 partners in the AWS marketplace. So chances are that whatever tools you're using today are fully compatible with the AWS cloud. One of the questions also, I'm really excited when I get this question, we got it from ExxonMobil also very early on, is how do we operate in the cloud? And it really excites me and makes me happy when I get this question because I can tell two things. One, customers are looking around corners. They're thinking ahead. And they know that eventually we'll get through the journey and get to the transformation. And the question is, how do we operate in the cloud? And the process is similar to what I already mentioned. Is you kind of start small. You start with a foundation team that needs to have a single-threaded owner, an STO or an STL, single-threaded leader. And it's going to own, bringing together the initial stage. Earlier on, you want to keep that team a little bit separate. Bring a product owner, understand what are some of the services that you want to offer in the cloud. Bring very early on also a financial analyst. The cloud is a huge marketplace. You have to understand where you're going to save money by automating. What do you need to shut down? What do you need to downsize? What are the better services? Are you going to use Spot? Are you going to use on demand? So you need somebody who understands all those mechanisms very early on and build that internal capability very early on. Start also looking ahead at, okay, how do we scale the training? What are some of the learnings? We will help you with that, but you also want to have that internal capability and bring somebody who is going to focus on change management and training very early on. And then start seeding, your cloud architects. Todd talked about their evolution and mental model thinking as they learn and as they evolve in their cloud journey and how that changed. It's never too early to start bringing that cloud architecture into the team. And as you grow and you scale, get the then you're gonna scale that into the organization. The team doesn't become separate anymore, and you start to embed and build around that team. You're gonna look at that point into the organization. Where do we need these teams? What's the right organizational model around it? Hopefully by then, if you don't have a product, mindset, you're starting to adopt that. Todd also referred to that. We see product management and product mindsets critical to really realize the benefits of the cloud. Start to look at how you onboard resources, how you onboard applications, how you scale. and start to look at things like the platform foundational elements I said. Eventually, the cloud will become your enterprise platform. So now it's the time, a few months into your journey when you start having that mental model and bring the solutions, the architecturing, the tooling, the automations, to bring that platform mindset, that operations, and that security profile in the cloud. And you don't have to do that by yourself. We obviously have the capability and you have the resources. As I said, we have plenty of tools that we bring or your partners can bring as well, and you can do that on your own. If you want, you can also engage with AWS Managed Services, AMS, where we'll bring some of our best practices and compliance to you, and we will work to just manage your cloud on a 24/7 basis. We'll manage your landing zones. We'll make sure that you're secure and compliant with your requirements. And you can do that on a month-to-month basis. We're not there to stand. I mean, we love to do that for customers while they're learning and while they're focusing on other things. But if at one point you want to take that back, or you want to take it to another partner or your MSP, you can do that very easily with us. And if you have a partner already that is managing your infrastructure, we have a certification program. We have over 100 MSP partners that are certified on migrations and operating in the cloud. You can use those as well. So just to wrap up, key takeaways. One, companies using the cloud to innovate and accelerate the energy transition. Talked about a number of them. Architect the cloud for the long term. Think about it as an enterprise platform. Make sure your security, your operations, the training around it is consistent with that. And in doing that, establish key architectural principles that are going to underpin your journey and your transformation. And then progress that journey through proven stages. We have this migration acceleration program, and we have many partners that are proficient in that and leverage and use it as well in transformations that they support. Establish the foundation, focus on lift and shifting and scaling, and then grow into modernization applications and doing cloud native development wherever it makes sense. And obviously, as always, find the right partners. We have the largest ecosystem of partners than any other cloud provider. So we have plenty of options to select those partners, and likely we're ready. Your current partners are already in that ecosystem. So with that, we have a few minutes for questions. So Todd, if I can invite you back up here.